tribal member, and I work as a community nutritionist and a native foods educator. And for the past several years, I've been coordinating the Muckleshoot Food Sovereignty Project. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how that project came about, how I became a coordinator from a nutritionist, and then, yeah. Also, I wanted to talk a little bit about the whole article that came out. I know I sent it out really early this morning, but did everybody get a chance to read it? Is there like enough critical mass here to talk about it, or?
Who had a chance to read it?
I have a little bit of it.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
We talked about it a little bit just before you came here. So, but obviously the perspective of the article was a recreational fisherman and
Yes.
his position on the nets. So,
Right.
I think, and we've talked about the, hatchery, harvest, habitat kind of approach,
And any discussion on the Bolt decision at all?
a little bit. I mean, you guys could, open it up. I mean, I think this is good to talk about.
I mean, I'd love to have just like maybe a short discussion on that before I go into this. I feel like that's just sort of the next step here.
Yeah.
And then, Roger and I ranted about it for a while yesterday. So. Yeah.
The Bolt decision, the 50% of the fish goes to the people that were here before, everything happened.
Yeah, and so and also Louis, I'll let him introduce himself here in a moment, but is a fisherman and his parents and his family was very active during the Bolt decision, so it's an incredible resource here, and I wanted to make sure that we had an opportunity to reference that. So from the perspective of tribes in 1855, when the treaties were actually signed here, our ancestors gathered, and it is written in ethnographic journals that those discussions that were taking place at that time, the leaders that gathered, were not interested in any kind of conversation without first addressing the issue of access to food. So it was about access to the wild game, the shellfish, the fish, the birds, the roots and berries, the cedar and fir tree. And that if Governor Isaac Stevens and our officials were not interested in furthering this conversation about access to food first, then our leaders were not interested in having any conversation about trading land at all. So at the very core of tribal sovereignty is food sovereignty. And at that time, Governor Isaac Stevens his perspective on salmon was that it was just some fish, and it wasn't really prized as it is today. Now we know wild salmon is like the nutritional powerhouse, right? So it's our superfood. Everybody's got to have access to it. And this was 1855, and by the 1940s and 50s, we are already seeing such a crazy amount of decimation of the habitat and of our fish runs that tribes, and then at the same time, and Lily can speak to this, we're having such a hard time actually fishing the right that was given to them in the treaty, which was all of the fish, that this whole revolution came out, the Bolt decision. People were doing things intentional protests around fishing. And so, is there anything you want to say about that? I feel like I'm a freshman here. And do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Louis Amaro. I'm a Muckleshoot tribal member and a fisherman my whole entire life. I've always sustained a way of life from fishing and lived my culture in that way. I've always harvested, hunted, fished. I was raised on a reservation from birth. I fished on the Duwamish, probably conceived there. In the whole position there, 73, so I was born in 74. So in my 40 years of life, I really feel like I've seen it go from an abundance to absolutely nothing. And I really believe that it's a lack of cooperation and co-management and those types of things. And things reflecting back to the 1855 when somebody said, I can't believe that, in the article, I believe they said, I can't believe that such a small amount of people can take half of the fish. When really, they were the minority at the time. It was, I mean, we're 1 million strong, you know, and now with disease and all of the things, and diabetes and all of the things that's happened to native communities and reservations and things, is now we have a lot of sickness and a lot of health issues on our reservation. I believe that it's from the lack of access of our foods, of not just salmon, but berries and fruits, and actually living that lifestyle and being on the landscape. Going back to the 50%, and it's really hard to manage a wild salmon on rivers nowadays, and not everybody has the luxury of taking out dams that have been here since 1910. We've had hatchery systems in our drainages just in Muckleshoot, you know, and we got the White River, the Green River, and the Cedar River, and all of our estuaries end up into the concrete jungle where there's no habitat, where we're just decimating it. We're down to 5%, and we're losing 5% of that daily, it seems like, with construction and all of the things that are going on. Having the Army Corps on all 3 of our systems, with Howard Hansen up on the Green River watershed, the Cedar River watershed, same thing, dams. Fish can only go so far. And they do have hatcheries in place, but after 92, I believe, when NOAA came in and put salmon on their endangered species list, and started taking and removing hatcheries out of the systems, wanting to manage for a natural habitat, but we're losing it daily so much that realistically it's not going to be able to be in certain areas. It's nice, like up on the L1 and stuff, where it's pristine, where they got all of that, you know. And we could make it work on ours too, but we'd have to take out Mud Mountain Dam, which is a flood issue for Tacoma and Puyallup and all of those. So I mean, there's a lot of obstacles that weren't really, they were a quick fix to get people jobs, to get money, revenue, and all of those types of things. But looking at it 100 years later, it could have been done a lot different, and we all could benefit. You know, but now we're trying to go back and fix something that's broken. Once again, going back to the creation story, that's why everything is connected. You make one thing better, well, you ruin the other 10 things in a row, and it's a domino effect. And it takes money these days. It's really hard to get everybody to work together. You know, go back to the Bolt. Judge Bolt made that decision in '74, and with agreement from that federal judge that there was going to be co-management for Native and the state, and we were going to work together. Well, '79 we had to go back to court because the state wasn't honoring it and wasn't listening. We were just decimating things. '84, Bolt stepped back in and took over the case and said, okay, I'm going to manage it. Washington State, you can't seem to do what you want to do, what needs to be done. I'm going to manage it. And he managed it and got everything down to where now today we have a working relationship. We don't always agree, but I mean, we sit at the same table, and basically we can agree on one thing. We all want salmon in the Northwest. It is our identity of the Northwest, not just Coast Salish people, but people of the Northwest. You know, I mean, all of my friends who are second, third generation that are non-Indian, that grew up steelhead fishing on the green, and all of these types of things, that it's a farce nowadays. You know, I mean, you're lucky to go down there and even see one or even hook one. Where when I was a little boy, you could go down there and limit out. Of course, they were hatchery fish. And a lot of these programs have been cut. You know, and tribes really do sit there and fight for the right thing. They do fight for funding for state hatcheries and all of these things. Tribes lobbyists to go back to D.C. for the state to get that funding for these types of things. Because not only does it affect us, it affects you also and the constituents of King County or wherever it might be in the state. So I read a little bit of that article that Val was talking about. It was a little disturbing. It was a little one-sided, but I think talking to Roger, even just knowing that all of the facts weren't there, and both parties weren't at the table. I mean, and you might get the same from the Indian side also, but I'm sure the facts will be there. Like in 74, it was ruled. Had to go back to court in '79. Judge Bolt had to come back in and rip it from the state and manage it himself to get it under control. And those types of things, just that people not wanting to work with each other. I think that that's one big hardship for all of us, because two peoples that can't get along, it's us little people who are going to suffer. It's the people out here, it's your children and your grandchildren. The difference between a native person is we're not going to pick up our villages and move our UNA and everything that we've established here for thousands of years and move away to some other river that's pristine. We have no choice. This is ours. This is what we're settled. We're rooted here. Like the one root that goes down, don't pull it. You know? So I mean, it just that's the only thing that needs to be said, because speaking to a non-native or a native, the perspective on things are so much different, because we are truly here forever. You know, our ancestors are buried in these lands. Our people are buried all over Seattle. You know, underneath the waters that have been flooded. All of these types of things. You know, and we truly believe that connection that makes us one with the land, and that ties us all in. So I mean, it's I don't mean to ramble. I was just kind of caught off guard. I was just coming here for support. So I'm not a very good public speaker. I just kind of speak from what I know and what I've lived. You know, there's a lot of hard work for each and every one of us, in Indian country and in non. I mean, we're decimating things daily. You know, and
Think globally, act locally, right?
excuse me.
Think globally, act locally is something I've been told since I was very young.
Absolutely. I mean, it matters what you do. It matters what you do in your yard. It matters what you do in your driveway. It really does. You know, and it matters what you're teaching your kids and you're teaching. You know, it's going to take everybody. You can't have a one-man revolution. Everybody has to be behind the movement.
So it's a river like the Duwamish, how dirty it is. Is that something where you would still fish there anyway? Or is that kind of like, well, it's so polluted, I'm just not going to touch it? And how does that affect, like, you know, your fishing?
It really affects each and every one of us. And yeah, we're working on cleaning it up, and it's something that's happened not overnight, so it's not something that's going to get done overnight. But yeah, every little bit counts. And when you're talking about a residential and something that's going through, it's different. It's different than a clam that was planted in that clam book. That's filtering all of that stuff 24/7. I wouldn't suggest you something that comes into a river one day and the rain, and then they're up in the pristine watershed. Yeah, that's fine. I mean, I'll never stop eating salmon. You know, even if it kills me. I don't think that the Duwamish is any dirtier than anywhere else. I think that they're all pretty in the Puget Sound.
They're all pretty dirty.
Yeah. So I mean, it's not just here in the United States. You know, it's global. It's not just in our watershed. I mean, we have a good pristine upriver, but even that, you know, people aren't being responsible, and things are getting in the water. You know, I mean, it's just human capacity. I've heard Billy was saying that in 10 years there's going to be 1 million more people in Washington. 10 years.
Yeah.
So I mean, everybody wants to live on the riverbank. Everybody wants to live on the creek bank and have a romantic. You know, everything sounds so great, but you don't really understand what you're doing. Just I'm going to get it. You know, we'll stop right here. Everybody's going to get it. It goes back to being proper managers and being able to manage something in a way that's healthy for the environment, not just what's healthy to your eyes and what it looks like. Like, back to the creation story, the red star and the bright star, and wishing on that, maybe hit the old man, you know, instead of the beautiful young man. You know, it just goes back to that kind of analogy, though, that you pretty something up, but you're really hurting something. You're displacing not only where that water might be going, but plants and animals and other types of things. And they have to go somewhere where they got. And I think a lot of people nowadays, it seems like they buy property and they're just clearing, plant different kind of foreign trees that really aren't indigenous to Washington. to be truly a lover of Western Washington, you know, to honor that kind of thing. And maybe that's just my native in me or whatever, you know, it's just, I think that, you know, palm trees are badass too, dude, but go to San Diego. Like, you know what I mean? It's just kind of that analogy. It's like, you're in Western Washington. You better like rain, you better like it cold, you know? I mean, it's don't bring California here.
Yeah,
I guess it's
plant a cedar.
you
We
know,
need more
and
conifers.
And it's just a responsibility of each and every one of us, you know? It shouldn't be on the shoulders of just one person or that, but it should be, to have a movement, you have to have everybody. You have to have everybody, and you have to sit down at a table when you can't agree with people. You have to lay out what you can agree upon and move forward. Let's not talk about what we're not going to agree about, but there's stuff that we're going to agree about. Let's work on that and get it done. You know, it's that constant power struggle between this one and this one and the feds. It's government to government, and a lot of that gets jumbled up. And a lot of it gets jumbled up by people misprinting things and not having all of the facts and letting both sides of the story. Because, you know, educated people want to argue their facts. Some people just want to go to the bar after this and have a couple beers and just find something to argue with. You know what I mean? Might not be right, might not even know all of the facts, but going off of that. And it just creates bad blood. You know? For the next 40 years, we have to be positive and really be strategic, or we're really screwed. You know, your grandchildren are screwed. Not only us, you know, our children and the grandchildren. So it's like, we have to work together, and we have to do something fast. And we have to come to some kind of compromise. And the natural, I love the fact it's romantic, natural, wild spawning salmon. It's romantic, but in some systems you're not going to get it. You can't, you know, you can't have a fish tank at home. Say you're raising a hatchery. You know what I mean? It's a fish tank. You know, and that's what you got. You know, so I mean, it's just those types of things where every system's different, every situation's different, but there's always a positive twist, and there's always something both sides have to offer. So it goes back to food. You know, it's just as much your right as it is mine, dude. You know, I mean, if you want to eat stuff that's going to give your kids cancer, that brings you all of the things that you need, a perfect cocktail to get cancer, I don't want that unless it's swimming up the river and I'm catching it that way. At least I'm staying rooted, I'm staying grounded, and doing what my ancestors and honored my people. You know? I mean, if it comes that way, that it's not going to be from eating stuff that we shouldn't be eating. I know I'm all over the place. I'm nervous.
You know, I wanted to say, especially one thing. How many of you were around in 1974? Anyone in this room? Okay, I'm assuming you were like a kid then. But you know, reading it in a history book and actually being there and feeling it, is a really different thing. There's a great movie I referred Carrie to, As Long as Rivers Run, that does a good job of sharing from mostly the native perspective, the emotional impact of it. Hopefully you can see it in the class. The other thing I like to share, because we learned, as Native people, we had to explain the Bolt decision to a lot of people. And one of the things we had to explain is, he didn't make it like, you know, on TV where the judge sits there and listens and then makes a decision. It took 4 years for him to make that decision.
Right.
All right, it took 4 years for him to go over testimony and read history and study and find legal precedents, and then he made the decision. And it always rang this, bell for me. I forget who said it. I think it sounds like Mark Twain. Maybe it was Abraham Lincoln, I don't know. Said, what's right ain't always popular, and what's popular ain't always right. And so in this particular case, it went to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court in this decision said, we got nothing to add. He's right. Okay? So at one level, people still want to fight that battle, but it went all the way to the Supreme Court. You can't fight it any higher than that in this country. And so legally it's there. But one other thing I'll mention very quickly is that because I'm an artist and because I'm a storyteller, things come from here. And as a human being, they come from here. And this fisheries guy, a non-native fisheries guy, said, we have all the science we need to save the salmon. We have all the resources we need to save the salmon. We have everything in place to save the salmon. What we lack is the will. We just don't want to do it. And how do you reach the will of people? How do you make them say, you know, we got to do something. We got to change things. We got to quit, whatever it is, we got to quit building along the rivers. We got to rebuild the we got to clear out all the culverts, whatever it is, we got to do it. But right now, most people are at the point was, I don't know. You mean I got to give up something? I got to sacrifice? I don't think I want to do that. So how do you reach the will of people? And I think that is, that's why you're here at Antioch, I think, right? Because, you know, they're not about just read this, memorize this, and log it online. They're about think about it, talk about it, you know, come up with some new ideas, those kind of things. And so how do you reach the will of people? We don't need any more studies. We don't need any more data. We don't need any more laws. We know what to do. We just won't do it. And so hopefully that ties in what you're saying. We got to figure something out, all of us.
I think also just to say one more thing about the Bolt decision with this article, which I hope you guys get a chance to read. Not that I'm like promoting this terrible writer. I mean, I really don't like the article at all, to be honest and frank. But that it was, you know, the heartstrings that it pulls on, and that Judge Bolt was not a popular person after making this decision with his community at all. He was blacklisted. And just last week we were at the Bolt celebration, and his children were his daughter and his grandson were there because he passed, and so they were there talking about him and what kind of a man he was. And for our community, he did really honorable work. Not just because it helped us out or any of those things, because it really did it. Like in '74, he didn't make that decision, and then all of a sudden, you know, people stopped shooting at our fishermen. I mean, people were shooting at our boats and cutting lines, and they still do it to this day. So I think that it's very disrespectful, and it's a person asking questions, and that's the way he's coming off, is just asking questions. And as we all know, you know, like Roger reminded me yesterday, that when you start the argument, you got to control it. And there's some really good advice that I got from a woman named Vandana Shiva, who is the seed sovereignty activist, right, for India. She said, if you want to go at Monsanto and all these people who are creating genetically modified species with numbers and figures and science, you will always lose. You will always lose, because that's their game, that's the way they play it, and science will always manipulate itself to look. It's like a teenager, right? Science is a teenager, actually. It thinks it knows everything. It has all the right answers, and it's young. It's very young. Traditional ecological knowledge, we're talking about, you know, 10,000 years at least here in this region managing salmon. So I think that's very important to point out. It's just the tone of disrespect that's there, and the questions, those innocent questions he's asking, that actually perpetuate another inaccurate history and stereotypes that does not help out our cause at all. So, or really doesn't even help out the whole issue of salmon recovery at all. So I just think that maybe we could ask better questions. All right, I'm going to blast through this pretty
Sure.
quickly.
Cindy, will you hit the lights? It'll probably, we can see this there. Yes.
Oh, no. Cool, and I'm obsessed with Prezi, and it never works for me, and I'm technologically cursed right now, so hopefully this works out. In 2009, when I graduated from Bastyr with my degree in nutrition, and by the way, I went to school for nutrition because my elders sat me down and said, your great Auntie Ollie, she lived to be 108. She passed away in the 90s, and she was famous for her claim to fame, to living to be over 100, was eating her traditional foods. And at the time, I was working as a caretaker, taking elders to different doctor's appointments and really watching them suffer with diabetes and heart disease and all kinds of the gamut of epidemics, and watching a health system that did not really serve the people. And so I wanted to go to school, understand, chemistry, anatomy, and all that stuff that our health system spits out of people, like we know what all that means. And also take that traditional foods perspective and really wonder, I really believe that in order to treat the disease, you have to treat the root cause. And the root cause for tribal folks is access to food, access to traditional foods and healthy foods, because 100 years ago, there was no reported incidence of diabetes in coastal communities. So that wasn't that long ago. That's like 2 generations. So we know that our diseases increased, our preventative nutritional diseases increased when we started losing access to food. And so I didn't want to be the kind of nutritionist that sat at the desk and counseled people on diets and told you what to eat, but wanted to really work with community to increase access to food so that we can actually treat the root cause of the issue. And in 2009, I was asked to work on a community-based participatory research project with the Burke Museum. I love saying that mouthful of words. And if you have studied CVPR, you know what I'm talking about. It's just about engaging the community in a process and not spending a lot of time on the disparities that we already know exist and we live with them every day and the reasons why, but really focusing on the solutions and how to overcome those challenges that we have. And this project actually emerged out of a database that archaeologists at the Burke Museum had been compiling for some time. And the Burke has an advisory board of Native people from the Squamish, Muckleshoot, and Tulalip tribes. And when they brought this database to these 3 folks who are all my teachers, so I know their story behind the meeting, this was at a time where actually all 3 of them had just come from funerals in our communities where we were putting people in the ground who had died of complications of diabetes and heart disease. So here they are looking at this pristine diet that people ate pre-contact, which was close to 300 different kinds of foods, and then living the real and witnessing the reality of what happens when a superimposed diet comes onto a community. And there are many factors behind that. And that is what we were out to find out from people. What are the barriers to accessing foods? So we held community discussions in Lummi and Squaxin Island and Squamish, and invited tribes from all over and people from all over to come and put in input on what foods they're currently accessing. And we were asking first, what foods are you accessing and where? But nobody would tell us where their harvesting grounds were, right? I couldn't tell you where my berry patch was. And what are the barriers to accessing traditional foods? And many things came out of this, like the discussion we're having today, right? A loss of rights, a loss of land, environmental toxins, capitalism, modern lifestyles, the built environment. Lots of things have impeded our access to traditional foods. And then my favorite part, what are the solutions? What were tribal people doing now, well, 2009 to now, to overcome barriers to accessing traditional foods, strengthen our food culture, revitalize our native food system in the process of this happening. And so at this time, I was also working as a tribal school nutritionist. They brought me in to write the nutrition program, and so I was writing menus and really witnessing how hard it was to put our traditional foods on the menu for our youth. Even just, putting an elk stew on the table once a week. We had our own tribal policies to navigate and the federal policies to navigate. So there's another barrier to accessing foods. And then the other half of the week, sitting with this group of solutions, right? People all over the Puget Sound rising up, all these accounts happening, and wanting to see something happen in my own community. So, so we started the Muckleshoot Food Sovereignty Project in 2009, and we were focusing on these 3 aims, and I won't read things to you because I know you can read. And then so we built edible education curriculum. The traditional foods principles is one of them. There's a couple of articles online I wrote about the traditional food principles if you'd like to research those. But it's things like how to implement a traditional foods diet in a modern world. So traditional foods are whole foods. They're local foods. They're seasonal foods. So eating in this way helps us strengthen our food traditions here in the Northwest. We also wanted to increase food production areas, so we installed several gardens, one at the Muckleshoot Tribal College and one at the school. I sat on the design for the new elders building we put in and did edible landscape. And we're still doing all of these things today. And then really focusing on partnerships. So here's your Antioch vocabulary. We're looking at the system. How do you intervene in the system to find those leverage points? Looking at what's already in place and the wealth that we already have instead of all of the barriers and all of the things that are wrong. Looking at what works and how to make it work even better. So what is that called?
It's like,
Positive.
yeah, positive reinforcement of the system, or
Yeah, there's something my boss always says, I can't remember right now. And then we started with, first out of the gate, a community food assessment. And if you Google this, a lot of like toolkits come up online, but it seems kind of different in tribal communities because most of the time you're working with people who know the land very well, who have their secret harvesting spots or fishing techniques. And we didn't really need to like nitpick everything. We just wanted to sort of build a vision of what our food system currently looks like. And we're very lucky today to have Roger Fernandez and Vivian Garl here who helped me build the whole thing too. And we were inspired by the Green Maps project. So if you Google Green Maps, it comes right up, but it's this whole movement that's happening around the globe where communities are coming together and mapping their local resources. And our friend Annie Brule was working on one for Vashon Island. And so these are images of hers that she's done. She's a really wonderful cartographer. And this was our first draft, done by Roger Fernandez. And it's a very topographical view, but we took this piece and held a community session, a community discussion with people saying, this is what we see that's already in place. What do you think about this? Is this what you think, a map of this? What would our food system really look like for people? And they said, this is great, but we are the Muckleshoot people. We sit at the base of the Mount Rainier and in between the Green and White Rivers, and when I think about our food system, I think about us being in it. And so Roger heard these words, and he developed this beautiful map. And by the way, does everybody know that his art piece is just right out here on the wall? He never talks about it, it just drives me nuts. So this is our Muckleshoot food map, and it was really a wonderful way of just looking at what we already have, the wealth that we come from, and then how we might make those pieces come together. And so over the last 4 years, we have done work like our traditional and custom harvesting grounds, taking people out, helping them identify our foods, our plants, getting their hands in the dirt, harvesting, and then we hold food storage classes, how to, freeze your berries or can your elk. We have focused on some work with the White River Hatchery. There's an article that I put up, a community event that actually Louie and the Fish Commission organized a couple years ago. Springer Drive, and there's a little recording of him on there talking about it and how it all. So you can Google it and it will come right up, or I can send you the link if that helps. But this is about getting people out on a day when the dams were adjusting the water levels, and so
They
the
were
water.
working on Mud Mountain Dam, so they let us know that they were going to drop the CFS cubic feet per second down to like 300. The flows were down to 300, so we knew that they were going to do this. And this being a water rights issue, we would never want them to do that, but they let us know that they were going to do this. So we have on the White River, we have a Springer Hatchery in it. And we don't get a big return back, but traditionally that's what ran up that river before Mud Mountain Dam. Is when the White River and the Green River ran together. It's called the Black River before they blew it and rerouted it down towards Tacoma into the Puyallup. So that dam was put on there for flood control because they rerouted it heading down into Sumner and Tacoma, or Sumner and Puyallup, I'm sorry, throughout Tacoma. And so we decided that we would have a traditional Springer Drive. So we let everybody know, and kids had gaff hooks and spears. We just pulled the net downriver, and it would scare the fish traditionally into the riffle. They wouldn't get caught in a gill net. And people would be there to spear or to gaff. So it's the first Springer drive that I've been on for a long time, since I was a little boy. Back before we won our water rights back, I mean, we were lucky to have 150 to 200 CFS at all times, and now we got it back to over 1,500 CFS. So with a lot of hard work and diligence from the fisheries staff at Muckleshoot, they won those water rights back for us.
So is that the gill net that you're holding right there?
Yeah, it's like a 60-foot net. It's just shallow. It's set up for catching them, but it's a scare net too. So we had a whole bunch of kids on the river and a whole bunch of the community. We shut down the community and actually had it like a potluck and went down and sat upriver. And a couple of us guys hung nets and just let the youngsters go out and do it. And, I just sat down there and mended nets while people were coming down the river. So it was really fun. And going back to talking about traditions and things like that, I have a big problem. It's really hard to get my little cousins to get off of their phones or out of, or fighting about something. That was 2 days that I didn't see no kids running around with cell phones. I didn't hear no fights. Everybody came together, and it was really nice. I mean, it was so peaceful and nice in our community. It was like I didn't know where I was, to tell you the truth. It's that connection that I'm talking about for our people that they didn't have for so many years. And I'm reflecting back to the Bolt decision. We did these things, but we did these things under protest, where people were getting arrested to do these traditional things to put food on our tables. And
intentionally arrested to have testimony.
yes. That's what led to the Bolt decision, and it was a celebration of that spring Chinook that used to come to our reservation, through our reservation. That river runs right through the heart of our reservation. Actually, it's blocked down the whole river bottom. So it was a really good day that day, and I hope to see more of it come. But like I said, we don't get a lot of opportunity for them to drop the river, nor do we lobby them to do that after we won in court to keep the water in the river. But they had to work on the dam, so it worked out well. We have a great relationship with the Corps, with the federal government. Not always seeing eye to eye, but we have a good relationship. So it's nice to be able to work with your other municipalities and to be able to work together and actually make lemonade out of lemons. So that's one thing of co-management right there, where it worked out perfect for the Corps, for us, and for the fish.
This is the tribal college berry garden that we planted in 2010, and just some of the things that we planted there. There's a ton of stuff now that's happened, and it's a really beautiful space. And when people came out and we were blessing the grounds with the staff at the college so that they could just be there to witness that work, and the volunteers that were there that day, was on Arbor Day, just happened to work out that way. And we installed the tribal school orchard and the berry garden in one day, which was nuts. It's like over 200 plants we put in the ground. And people said, we really want to do a celebration of it, something that honors the berries and brings people into this garden to celebrate so that they know that it's here for them. And so we ended up holding the first annual berry festival in 2010, and then it changed to we did a berry festival the next year, and then we did a harvest festival. I think we just changed it, and then this last year we changed it to Food Sovereignty Festival. But annually we do one sort of food gathering where people can come together and celebrate foods. We also have the Vashon clam beds. So this is another issue of access to food. In order to get to the clam beds, you got to be able to have time off of work, have money for gas, have money to get on the ferry, hike, have the physical capability of hiking down a very steep and treacherous hillside, and then have the energy at that time to dig plants, which there's many different barriers listed there. But our tribe does do a lot of focus on growing our own oysters and clams and mussels. And it's important to know that we have Shellfish Gardens. They were actually like gardens. And this is, you know, when Captain Vancouver came into the Puget Sound region, he said, no, I've never seen such land that looks so untouched by man. But actually what he didn't know is that he was looking at very well-maintained gardens. So I'm always so irritated. I think that the Beacon Hill Food Forest is awesome. That's so cool. You know, it's these two worlds coming together. The press that came out on that said, Seattle's first food forest. And I thought, no, it's not Seattle's first food forest. There's a food forest that's always been here. You know, it's been here